This is Mac Payne here with episode 1750 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about a must-read book. The title of it is Tap Code. It's about an Air Force pilot who was shot down in Vietnam. He was held in the Hanoi Hilton for 8 years. His name was Colonel Carlyle Smitty Harris. The book is not only about the colonel, who did some tremendous things while he was being held captive. It also tells about his wife, Louise Harris, who is one tough customer you don't want to mess with. When you read this book, you'll find out why. When Colonel Harris was shot down and badly wounded when he ejected from his aircraft, they threw him in the Hanoi Hilton. It just so happened that he learned something called the Tap Code system in an Air Force survival training school he attended. He used that Tap Code system to develop a way that all the POWs in that prison could communicate with each other, and undoubtedly helped many of them make it through those tough times. While he was imprisoned in the Hanoi Hilton, his wife was just not sitting home twiddling her thumbs, worrying about her husband. She had 3 children to raise on her own, and she proved she was a tough customer. Colonel Harris was based out of Okinawa when he was shot down in Vietnam. His wife and family were living with him in Okinawa at the time. When he was shot down, his wife was pregnant with their 3rd child. At first, they said, "You're going to have to go home. Your husband's been shot down." And she says, "I got news for you. I ain't going nowhere until this child is born." She was about 8.5 months pregnant at the time. And guess what? She didn't go home. She stayed there until her child was born. She went back home and was going to settle down in Tupelo, Mississippi, and had a few hurdles laid down in front of her. She ended up talking to several very important people who helped her get over these hurdles. One of them was the Secretary of the United States Air Force himself. Another was the president of General Motors. Then she had to get in touch with Senator Stennis to straighten out a problem with the VA when she tried to get a loan to buy a house to live in with her 3 children. It is a story you've got to read. Something else that grabbed my attention about this story was the fact that it happened in Tupelo, Mississippi. That's way up there in North Mississippi, not far from Guntown, where back in the Civil War in 1864, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a military commander for the Confederacy, encountered a Union force in Guntown, Mississippi, near Bryce's Crossroads. He laid the worst whooping on any American military unit, short of Custer's last stand, in the entire history of the U.S. Army. The commander of the Union force, General Sturgis, when they got back to Memphis, he was in such bad shape, he immediately resigned from the Army. That was history that occurred there in the Tupelo area. Also, Elvis Presley was born in Tupelo. That's why anytime I see a story related to the Tupelo, Mississippi area, it catches my attention. And I'll guarantee you this story about the book Tap Code is worth taking a look at. Matter of fact, the book Tap Code is on the recommended reading list for this podcast. Go over to the podcast website at VietnamVeteranNews.com. That's easy. You can't forget that. Check out episode 1750. There you will see the book itself and a handy link you can click on and be reading it in seconds if you go the Kindle route. Whichever way you go, get a copy of this book and read it. I guarantee you will appreciate what these 2 great Americans did for their country. Recently, in Tupelo's Daily Journal newspaper, they wrote a story about this book. Specifically, the library there has a program called Tupelo Reads, where they pick out selected books and recommend people reading them. I'm going to share that story with you so you can hear a little bit more about the book and the people in it and the people who helped make it possible to encourage you to get a copy of it and read it. Right now, If you are still in a lockdown situation, this would be a great read while you're waiting for the economy to open up. It would be a great read even if the economy was open. Let's take a look at this story that talks about this book and this tremendous couple. Title of it is Tupelo Reads selects Tap Code as this year's book. The story was submitted by none other than Bobby Pepper, a writer for the Daily Journal. I wonder if Bobby's related to my good buddy Ronnie Pepper, who lives over in North Louisiana. Could be. It's not that far away. Let's take a look at Bobby Pepper's story. Again, title is Tupelo Reads selects Tap Code as this year's book. Dateline, Tupelo, Mississippi. A story of courage in a Vietnam POW prison and on the home front is this year's selection of the Tupelo Reads Community Reading Program. Tap Code by retired Air Force Colonel Carlyle Smitty Harris and Sarah W. Barry is the 10th installment of the series and the first featuring local authors. The Tupelo Reads Committee announced the choice Thursday morning during a news conference near the F-105 Thunderchief jet displayed at Veterans Park. Harris flew an F-105 Thunderchief during the Vietnam War. For our 10th year, we could not think of a more inspiring story that has grit and determination and perseverance, some of the same qualities we're needing right now to get through this interesting time we're in, said Tupelo Reads Chairwoman Lisa Reed. Lisa, I could come up with a different word than interesting to describe this stupid mess that we're in now. Apparently nobody even thinks about the Hong Kong flu that came through in 1968 and killed over 100,000 Americans, and we didn't shut anything down for that. Now we're running like a bunch of scared wussies and shutting everything down because a few people are getting sick. Pardon me, that was my editorial comment. Let's get on with the story. Tap Code is the story of Smitty and Louise Harris and how they endured while Smitty was held captive for 8 years. Harris was shot down over Vietnam on April the 4th, 1965. While imprisoned in the Hoa Lo prison, nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton, Harris revived the Tap Code, a long unused method of communicating through tapping on a common water pipe. He covertly taught the code to many POWs, and in turn they taught others. The POWs were able to communicate without their captors' knowledge. That's pretty good because those Vietnamese were some smart little dudes. The book also focuses on Louise, who raises their 3 children alone in Tupelo, unsure of her husband's fate. One of the first POW wives of the war, Louise became a role model for many wives advocating for herself and her children in Smitty's absence. When you read this book, you will see some of the amazing things she did, and I am very impressed with Louise Harris. She gets things done. Smitty Harris, who was joined by his wife at the news conference, said Barry did an outstanding job compiling their stories into a book. My daughter worked with Sarah and convinced Sarah to give it a stab, he said. She did an absolutely beautiful job of putting manuscripts, things she got out of books, and other sources all in one story. Also, she spent a lot of time interviewing Louise to get her story. Reed added, Sarah weaves the story so you get a sense of what's going on at home and what's going on in the prison. It's just woven together so well, and you get both perspectives, which I thought was really great. Barry, who also attended the news conference, said the selection of Tap Code for Tupelo Reads is a tribute to Smitty and Louise. I'm so honored and thrilled for the fact that many more people will be able to hear this beautiful story, she said. And like Lisa said, the timing could not be more perfect because the message is so important right now of courage, and that's what you get in this book. I think by the end, everyone will see Smitty and Louise as 2 heroes we can emulate. That's what they said about the book Tap Code. It is well worth reading, I guarantee you. Again, if you are in the North Mississippi area, you just might want to take advantage of an upcoming opportunity where you can actually meet the Harrises in person. They will be the keynote speakers during Lunching with Books on Wednesday, September the 30th at the Lee County Library. That's Lee County, Mississippi. It's very convenient to Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, Shreveport, Louisiana. Who knows? Maybe my good buddy Ronnie Pepper might like to go over and meet the Harrises. You now have your marching orders. Immediately go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com. Go to episode 1750. Go to the image of the book. Tap code. Get your copy. You can get it in hard copy or you can get it in the Kindle version. If you go the Kindle route, you can start reading it in about maybe 7 or 8 seconds. You may want to get a hard copy and take it with you to the library on September the 30th and get Smitty and Louise to autograph it for you. That'd be a thrill. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1750 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these programs. You are cordially invited to come again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?